right, let's see if I can sit here and remain calm and remain peaceful. This video, as you can see, is being done on my computer, so that ought to save us from the shenanigans that we that we always get when I do this on my phone. One moment. The phone just gives us a chance. Let's see how many pillows I can sit on. The phone just gives us a chance to get more people. I don't know if I can sit on this many pillows, but it's the camera or the microphone. It would help if I have the microphone. God, I've gotten out of practice. I haven't made a video in what? Has it been 2 weeks? Someone pointed that out to me yesterday. Hello, Lynn. How are you? Hopefully you can hear me because I didn't have my microphone. Okay, let's see if I can straddle this bunch of pillows so I'm not down under, not as in Australia, but down under the desk here. Hello and welcome to the news that didn't make the news. Wow, there's a lot of light happening in my background. I turned my overhead interrogation lamp off because someone brought to my attention that it was very distracting. So thank you for that, John. And a shout out to Scott Evans for reaching out and checking on me. I am doing fantastically well. Here comes the gnats to join the party. So we're going to talk about a lot of things here this evening. Hopefully, after the last video I made about your crown chakra being blown open by the energy and taking your shoes off, you took your shoes off or did a little swimming or standing in water or something. So let's see if I can try to hold still. I pull in a lot of energy when I come here to do this. So it's going to be a mixed bag tonight, as it usually is a mixed bag. Okay, we're going to talk about higher self. We're going to talk about dissension of the higher self, because everyone likes to leave that part out. We're going to talk about dissension. We're going to talk about ascension. We're going to go into interdimensional psychopaths. We're going to talk about who and what we really are, why we came here, and what the impetus is. I don't know where that came from. What is the impetus for right now? And why does Tina call herself we? There are so many people. I even recognize a friend of mine's voice from Facebook that was on a short video with someone else's face and their lips moving, but I could hear the voice belong to Carrie Kay, which is interesting because she has a voice that just stands out to me. I don't follow her because I feel like we pretty much, when I was reading or listening to her a couple years back, we were on the same page. Same with Amanda Lawrence, Magenta Pixie, and a couple other people. We tend to tap into and disseminate some of the same information. So the majority of us don't listen to each other. So hello and welcome to the news. And let's get into this psychopathic mixed bag of mumbo jumbo here. Something that I started to mention to you guys, I want to say 5 or 6 years ago, is that we are changing the hive mind, not only of humanity, because not only is humanity a hive mind, the archonic psychopaths are also a hive mind, like many of the insects and bees, specifically hornets and wasps on this planet. They all share a hive mind, and we like to put it in pretty little terms that we call the collective consciousness. I won't call it the collective consciousness for the Archon hive mind, but nonetheless, they are just as affected by a hive mind as human population is. So I started to mention this to you about 5 or 6 years ago. And the reason actually it wasn't 5 or 6 years ago, it was 2016 before I started making videos that I had. And if anybody's been following me for a long time, while I was on the phone, I had a flashback of a past life in Atlantis while I was in the middle of a phone conversation. And there was a real and valiant realization that what you and I are doing is affecting the hive mind mentality of the archons. And so, why would that be a big deal? Now, you and I can consciously or unconsciously or super consciously tap into the human collective. The archonic collective works no different. However, let's say because the majority of archons are interdimensional beings, they have not chosen a physical body on this physical planet at the moment. They just like to mess with us and mess with ours. However, there are some archons that have taken on a physical body, and what that means is whatever they are experiencing, they're sending back to the hive mind. So let's say that where you work, possibly your family, possibly even a partner, and I don't mean for this to have a negative connotation, to say all archons, interdimensional or physical, are negative would be like saying all of humanity is positive, and we know that that is not the case. So if you are living with, working with, possibly have a partner even that is part of the archonic, physical, or interdimensional species, your interaction, you're working with that person, you're living with that person, your relationship with that person is going to go back and change and affect the hive mind of the archons. So let's say you happen to be dating or married to an archon, for an example, and you have this very brilliant and valiant reason to work towards humanity's peace, towards humanity's sovereignty, and towards humanity's freedom, and you live with that person, and you're, you know, having sex with that person, you're eating with that person, you're sharing a consciousness with that other person, that other archonic deity, whether interdimensionally or in your physical reality, whatever you're experiencing with that person they're going to send that back into the hive mind. So why is that a problem? Well, it's not going to be a problem for you and I. It's going to be a problem for the archons. If they are here for enslavement, usurpment, and manipulation, and you're dating one or have one in your family or you're working with them, your positivity, your light, your brilliance, your will to change a planet into a sovereign, beautiful being that she once was, you are going to rub off on that other person. And just because the hive mind is even stronger with the archonic force than it is with humanity's collective consciousness, whatever you're sharing with that person, whether it's breaking bread, whether it's in the bedroom, whether it's you have a job and you're working with that person, your light, your brilliance, your expansion, your super consciousness, your want, need, desire to free the planet, um, and the planet's people and all of sentient life is going to rub off on that archonic being. And that archonic being is so the difference is it's a little bit stronger of a persuasion, right? I can be negative or positive. I can intentionally, unintentionally, consciously or unconsciously drop things into the grid and drop things um, into the collective conscious. The way the archonic network, if you will, is set up is that it is set up so that when there's a plan or a project, hence the title of this video, who is overseeing this project, whatever that plan is, they are reporting back to the hive mind. Well, what happens to this person? Scott, I just mentioned you a few minutes ago. Thank you so much for reaching out and checking on me. So, with the archons, if you're dating one, sleeping with one, married to one, working with one, your brilliance, your desire to change this planet and the planet's consciousness moving into super consciousness, what you're doing, what you're saying, how you're feeling in relationship with that archon. And again, I'm not making a judgment because they're not all negative, but they do all systemically report back to the hive. So don't say, "Oh wow, I didn't know Scott was an archon and now I'm going to break up with him," and don't go crazy, right? So I'm just kidding. Scott is not an archon. But if you're dating someone or working with someone, or if there's someone in your family that is in constant connection, and intellectually or energetically sending information back to the hive, you can see how this would be disturbing to the archon's plans, right? Like, oh, I fell in love with Tina and I see her desire to do A, B, and C, and it's rubbing off on me and it's changing my energy. And now you have an archon that's sending Tina's light or Scott's light or Lynn's light back to the hive. Okay. So you and I are massively changing the hive mind of the interdimensional archons and of the archons who have chosen at this time to take on a physical body. And that is a big deal. I'm assuming you guys can hear me okay. I see Lynn and Scott is here and somebody else is here that's not talking, that's not typing. That's fine if you want to be shy. But no one's commented in the last few minutes. So I'm assuming that you can hear me. Okay. All this talk about ascension and dissension is something I started talking about a couple years ago as well. Okay. Thank you, Lynn. Thank you very much. Glad to hear that. I'm glad you can hear me because when I started, my microphone was over there. I guess silly things happen when you don't make videos for 2 weeks, right? You lose your mind or you forget about your equipment or whatever I've got going on. So, there are so many things that go into what is happening right now. We have completed a 26,000 year cycle, and I have been saying for a while how I feel or how I am perceiving this shift is that March 21st of 2025 was the end of a 26,000 year cycle, which can make people feel a little disheveled. Like you may still have connections and jobs and friendships and geographical locations that are the same, but it may feel like a little bit like you're in the process of limbo. And that's why we've started something totally brand new, and many of us are scrambling. This will, as I always guarantee, be a mixed bag of information here. So we are massively changing the hive mind of the archons in that are interdimensional only, and also those that have chosen to take on a physical body as well. The higher self is the combination of the soul's journey in every path that you've chosen. So you cannot talk about ascension, therefore, without talking about descension, right? We don't just start rising up in a human body on a 3D planet in a 3D body when we're living a completely 3D life, right? So what happens are I guess, are because multiple things happened, right? So, past life experiences, fractals, right? You're a soul and you just keep incarnating. And unfortunately, or sometimes fortunately, because you might lose your faculties and your mind if you remembered all your lifetimes, though we are picking up on parts and pieces through meeting, soulmates and other kind of relationship dynamics. We are a fractal of God to begin with. We come down, we fractalize ourselves as a part of the all knowing, all seeing, all creating. We live this life, we exit this life. The soul just keeps going, right? And going and building on its repertoire of understanding and wisdom and information. We are just fractals of God, living in God, living as God, experiencing ourselves as God, experiencing ourselves as a creator every time we come back around. So these past life fractals descend down into your physical form. And I'm sure that, this will be something that most of you can recall when this started happening. I know for me, the one way that I knew that this was happening, even though I was already previously awake and was very psychically connected, the higher parts of self didn't really start to descend down, I don't think, until maybe 2014 or 16. And by 2018, some of it was really, really startling. Okay. So when multiple higher self fractals of the soul that I have always been started filtering in, it became the difference of like living in a body and watching an old TV set from the 70s that struggled to get a station and sometimes was staticky, to having a new like LCD super plasmatic state of the art television where when you like walk into Costco and the TVs are on, it looks like you're actually in it, right? So that's what happens. So for most of you, you will probably remember when the higher self started to descend in, because everything became like you were in a television that went from an old, outdated, maybe analog television to some super plasmatic, ultra spacey experience. And that's what it feels like when higher self starts to descend down in. Now, these past life fractals of experience descend down into your form, and the whole of the experience will come in, right? Not the memory of the experience. You may, like I said, meet contractual, soulmates, divine partnerships, twin flames, that kind of stuff. That's definitely going to amp up your game a little bit, right? Depending on your perception and whether you want to be into that or have that experience. But past life experiences, past life fractals of experience start to descend down into your physical form to become the whole of the now experience mixed with past experience. Okay, so it's the experience or the knowledge, what you're tapping into. And again, not going to be, the whole, obviously, the memory. That would be way overwhelming. Sometimes it happens a lot when you meet those relationship contracts and you're like, how do I know this person? Why am I suddenly seeing him in Egypt with eyeliner on? That's one of the things that happened to me. Like, I saw this guy's face now as he looks now, but he was standing in Egypt, I would have to say, as a pharaoh with a lot of blue eyeliner on, right? Maybe I'm trying to just be like him with my blue eyeliner over here, I don't know. But that started happening a couple of years ago. So those past experiences, those fractals of experiences, then descend down into what you've going on right now. So you're reuniting with past selves. And again, you're not, maybe possibly not reuniting with a memory or a full memory, but reuniting with past selves for the wisdom, the gained knowledge, and the gained clarity. Okay. So you're no longer a singularity. Now, I started doing this way before I realized I was doing it. And who's going to point it out to me because I live by myself, right? So, no one. I talk to myself incessantly as well. It's going to be very interesting when my partner shows up or maybe he already knows. Maybe he is aware of it. Maybe he has a lot of descended qualities, gained wisdom as well, and he's already aware, or even he may be super aware of it. But we're no longer a singularity, right? And so while it's not as noticeable as I'm walking around talking to myself right here in my house, it will be when someone else is here. Now, I will tell you that the experience is that most people don't listen to you, or listen to you um so intently that they pick things up. Now, I notice that people that watch my videos listen to me very intently, and I can tell that when they come back after the video is published and they make comments, or they reach out to me directly and say, wow, oh my God, this, right? But most people in your everyday reality are not listening to you with that same fervor that they would even really notice. Okay. But I was having an experience, and this has been going on for a while. Even when I'm talking to myself, I am referring to myself as we. Okay. Like, what do we want to have for lunch? What are we going to do? What is the job that we're going to do first today? I don't think anything of it, and it's been going on for years. However, I was taking a walk with my neighbor the other day, and I said something, and I said, we, and she said, yeah, who? And I said, we, and she said, no, but like you and who? And I said, oh, there was no you and who, not to sound like Dr. Seuss. I was just talking about me, but I was like, I refer to myself as we. Um, that was the end of that conversation, of course. But a lot of people are not listening that closely or that attentively to notice maybe that you have changed the verbiage about self, right? Um, we are no longer a singularity, right? Now, you could say, I have the same soul and I keep coming back, and maybe I look similar. Maybe the sound of my voice is similar, and maybe I keep repeating the same gifts until, I get it right. I just keep coming back for that. But we are, in our own consideration of self, we are no longer singularity once you realize that. And, if you have someone living with you or taking a walk with you, maybe they have asked you why you refer to yourself as we, like people have asked me why I refer to myself as we. Now, something that I think super important, and again, and I'm only saying this because I don't want you to think that everything that I'm saying, like, oh, I just had this realization yesterday and now I'm going to share it. It's just the incredible way that it ties in. And people that have followed me for the last several years will know, like, oh, she's talked about this thing before, because I tend to find that the majority of you do pay pretty close attention um, to what I say. Where was I going with that? Totally lost my train of thought. Yes. So I don't refer to myself as singular. Now, one of the things, and this was quite a trigger for me for a while until I realized what was happening. Now, the amount of people in my feed with the name Tina, Christina, Athena, with similar names is pretty astounding. Now, I do understand if you've had perhaps legal issues or judicial issues or stalking issues, that maybe you would want your name to be Athena on, Facebook or your social media platforms. I'm finding it disheartening and also disingenuous with people that are doing that at this point, because we all talk about how we want the world to change, But if we're still hiding behind something that is not our name, that is slowing down your process. Now, I don't have a right to be mad at you or disappointed at you, in you, if you want to call yourself Rainbow Wizard or, Athena the Green Giant or whatever it is that you've named yourself. Maybe you are part of the Witness Protection Program and you need that name. In that case, maybe that's a possibility. Now, what I will say is it's an extremely important part of the dissension process when we start to make a connection with Athena, um, with anybody, with the Pleiadians, with Mother Mary, with Jesus. Do I think because your name is Jesus on Facebook that you are the reincarnation of Jesus? No, I don't. And I'll tell you why. Now, I did have talked about this briefly probably 3 years ago, but this is such an important thing. Your DNA has a whole host of archetypes in it. One of those archetypes is Jesus, one is Buddha, one is Ishtar. Um, the list goes on and on and on. One of them is Athena, right? So there are all of these beautiful archetypes that came along. And when the dissension process starts, you may find a real resonance with Athena, right? Maybe that is an archetype of strength, of the athlete, of the goddess of prayer, all these things, right? So each of these archetypes has their own beautiful set of assistance and instructions. Doesn't mean that you were meant to have your name on social media as Rainbow Wizard for the rest of your life. Doesn't mean that you should believe in every speck of your existence that you are Jesus, that you are Mother Mary, that you are whatever. Because the first thing I want to tell you is if and when someone such as these archetypes that I'm speaking about decided to come down and reincarnate in a physical body and have another life at this great awakening, that person not only could, but would fractalize themselves into multiple beings, right? So we are talking about our experience as God. We are talking about our experience as the creator. We are talking about bridging the gap between where we were when we were born and the super consciousness awakening now. And all those archetypes are built into your DNA so that at a certain time, you can pick and choose who in that lineup of archetypes you want to connect with for whatever wisdom, whatever strength, whatever fortitude, whatever it is that you need in that moment. Now, the part that I talked about before is that that is not who you are as a reincarnation. I know a lot of people don't like to hear that, specifically because I think it makes them feel special. But again, if Mary Magdalene or Athena or anyone of that archetypal range was going to show up and incarnate in Tina, for example, they wouldn't just pick me. They would probably pick 50 or 100 people to fractalize off into because of what we are going through, because of the great awakening, that person would fractal off. There's nothing wrong with resonating with Athena or Jesus, Muhammad, Buddha, Ishtar, anybody, right? But what I'm saying to you is that is a step, that is a process that comes with the dissension process. So, because it's not easy, guys, this is not all rainbows and unicorns, even though it does include that in the mixed bag as well, right? So, those archetypes are there to connect with, to give us strength, to give us what we need at that time, right? I had many conversations for years with off planet beings, and that's where the information came from initially that I was sharing in written form before I even started doing videos. And the person I was speaking with called me Athena for many, many years. Did I take that on and change my social media name and think, oh my God, I'm the reincarnated Athena? No, I never did. But I understood why he referred to me as Athena. I had a really hard time with him coming to me and telling me about plasmatic weapons, about plans of the cabal. Many things were very hard for me to take, right? So he referred to me as Athena because he noticed that my posture changed, my demeanor changed, um, the strength of my power changed, everything changed because I no longer had to be little old, here's Tina trying to explain some crazy stuff to friends, family, neighbors, and people on social media, right? So I use that. And mostly the athletic side of Athena is very, very empowering, right? You ever look at the archetype of her, like she's got a muscle where you didn't know muscles even were. She's ripped 6 ways to Sunday. Okay. So now, it's an archetype. These are all archetypes to be of assistance to you, but they're to be of assistance to you, not to be a crutch to you, right? So I was resonating in the resonant field with Athena, the archetype of Athena, as long as I needed that strength, as long as I needed that power, as long as I needed to feel like I was bigger than the person I was at the moment, and that I could have the balls to come in front of you and speak this. And it's important for me to do that, as I love to tell you guys all the time, because we are the majority of the planet, unless you're an NPC, the majority of the planet is experiencing what we like to call craziness or tinfoil hat syndrome right now. And most of those people who have not found their tribe, it's very scary, as it was for me. And even though I knew many things and I didn't go through an awakening of sorts, I was born this way. When it came to the time where I was asked to start speaking or writing or whatever about this stuff, I didn't think that I was strong enough to do it. And sometimes you can tell that I waver with that when we get a bunch of people on here, when I go on my phone and everyone starts saying very mean things to me. You can still see that sometimes I waver, and it always ends up being a perfect example because they're always talking about whatever the subject is that's here. So I have to remind myself not to be hypersensitive to that. But we are to use that archetype of whomever that person is to really, really help us. Hello, Tip. How are you? Hugs back to you. According to YouTube, the only person that is here is Tip, and I'm not sure if that's the case. That's why I prefer to use my phone. But I digress. Okay. So all these past experiences are coming in to help us. And that dissension process is when we connect to Jesus or Athena, Mary Magdalene, Archangel Michael, right? But after a while, it can become a crutch. And that's not what it's meant to be. I myself don't refer to myself as a singularity anymore, because I don't feel like a singularity, and I haven't for many years. I call myself we, and most people either don't listen close enough to notice, or they say you and whomever, and then I have to say, oh no, I was just talking about myself. So the question is there anybody overseeing this project? The answer is yes. That's why I started with we are massively changing the hive mind of interdimensional archons and the archons that have chosen to take on a physical body at this time. The question is, are these interdimensional psychopaths running the show? Well, they would like to believe they are, but your light and your brilliance and your interacting with them, whether that's physically or interdimensionally, is sending your light, your brilliance, your vibration, your wisdom, your love for the planet, your love for sentient life, whatever specific thing you're working on or you're carrying, we are sending that back to the hive mind. So, what we are doing, what we are thinking, what I'm saying here to you, all of that brilliance, all of that light is going back to the hive mind of the archons. And even though you're doing it unconsciously, we are infiltrating the hive mind of the archons. So basically, I'm telling you, there are, as we know, there are factions of people in physical bodies and some not that are helping, some on planets, some not. But basically, you and I are the ones that are overseeing this project, right? And those interdimensional psychopaths can have an effect on you. But you have to authorize that. Now, that doesn't mean I reach up and pray out and say, oh, I authorize the archons to do this thing. Your authorization is your behavior. So if I'm on here and I've got a vegan channel and I'm praising veganism and giving you recipes and then stopping at McDonald's for a cheeseburger when I'm done filming, that is an authorization for a physical archon or an interdimensional archon to mess with me, right? That's just an example. I'm sure there are people doing that because I feel like there's so many charlatans that are getting exposed now. If I am doing one thing and saying another, that is an authorization. And I want you to understand that very clearly. Okay. Now, I don't mean, oh, okay, I promised myself, I would eat a low calorie diet. And today I gorged at the Easter picnic. And now I have authorized archons. What I'm telling you is if you are saying, preaching, writing, blogging, filming things from a perspective, and you are not living that life, that is an authorization. Okay. And this, I believe, is why David Wilcock had his little stint that he had while he was basically in a holding cell somewhere and they were still making videos with him. Okay. Yeah, that is a video called Is It the Real David Wilcock or a Clone? If you haven't seen that, you might be interested. I believe that's about 2 years back. Okay. Now, he was doing one thing, saying one thing, and another. Now, this is the thing, and I'm not saying, oh, David Wilcock is a bad guy. Not saying he was given disinformation, not saying any of that. I'm saying they have a certain way that they get to you. Okay. And they normally will get to you if you are, let's say you're living the life you're projecting. I'm telling you to take off shoes and be grounded because that's what helps, and I know that helps, and I know what's going on, and I can see how that shifts the body because that's what I do, right? But if I wasn't doing that, that'd be a different story. So David Wilcock has always done a ton of free information, and then you can pay $500,000 or however much it is to see him on the speaking circuit if that's something you wanted to do back in the day when he was doing that. And that's where the money came from. Okay. And now here's how tricky it can be with authorization. Here, Elizabeth comes along and was interested in him. Oh, okay. So we're not going to do this. We're not going to, help people for free. We're going to have this class. It's going to be $333, blah, 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 blah. And again, it's a very fine line. So I'm not telling you that you can't sell your goods or sell your services either. But when you come into, what is the word? What is the best word for me to use here? All right. So you say you're doing something to be of assistance in humanity, and that doesn't mean you're working for free. All I want to tell you is Elizabeth was a handler. And when Elizabeth got thrown into the mix and started making his business decisions that were out of alignment with what he chose to do as a soul, that was enough, guys. for him to be messed with. And now he is back now, but that is a very messy process. Again, if you're interested in that, you can watch the video in my feed called Is It the Real David Wilcock or a Clone? Okay. And I go into that whole story. But it is a very fine line. Okay. And when you are saying, filming, writing, blogging, your true feeling doesn't mean you have to be correct, doesn't mean you have to be accurate, has to be accurate and truthful to the best of your knowledge in alignment with your soul, or you authorize being messed with. That's how this works. Now, if you are not doing anything that authorizes being messed with in any way, the plan has always been and will always be to send someone in to mess with you. Could be someone telling you, oh, I think you're my twin flame, and all this other stuff. So you listen to them. Maybe you veer off the path or discount yourself, or it is such a fine line. It makes it hard to explain. Yes, Elizabeth was sent in to be a handler for David Wilcock, and that means being handled. Okay, so what I'm telling you is I personally don't do anything. I don't send out an energetic authorization, because what I'm experiencing, even if it's not the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, as I always tell you, I don't have. When I'm sharing from authenticity, it is a non-authorization. So they will send someone in to pretend to be a soulmate, to pretend to be in love with me, it doesn't matter. Okay. This is the reason that I don't go to bars. And there are many places I have cut myself off on a physical limit from that. And the reason that I do that is, if you are a person who energetically is not playing their game, say, all that means is you're authentic. Doesn't mean you know everything. Doesn't mean you're perfect. Doesn't mean any. It just means that you're authentically being yourself and sharing yourself in a way that's authentic and truthful. You don't authorize. And when you live a lifestyle that you don't authorize interference, interference is often sent to you through social media. For women, through men specifically, but it's not limited to that. It can be jobs, right? It can be someone professing, you're the most talented fill in the blank that I've ever seen. You're the most beautiful person I've ever seen. I'm so blown away by your beauty. I have to know you. Whatever it is to get in there, right? To water down or lessen the importance of what the soul dissension process has taught you and that you're supposed to be doing. And I just wanted you to know that. Okay. So it can be as simple as, even though whether you like him or not, David Wilcock, and I've been watching him for months, is a stand-up, authentic person. He always has been. But once the handling got thrown into the mix, and we are all handled in ways, it can be someone in the grocery store, right? It can be a temporary handling. We don't all marry our handler, okay? We don't all fall for that. And that's not a dig on anyone who had a relationship with their handler. I don't mean it that way either. I'm just telling you, these are the sneaky little ways that these interdimensional little psychopaths can get to you. If you are clean, authentic, and truthful with what parts of self that you know, there can be none directly. They will send a man, an employer, a taxi driver, 4 dogs in the woods, whatever it is that they can get to you. You guys, I have had issues and needed protection since I was a child. And when I was a child, obviously I did not understand this. I didn't understand why they were messing with me so heavily, because It started way before I started talking, and it started way before I started writing, and I didn't understand it. There are so many people that are, out there talking. And basically, what they said to me is it's not about what you're doing, it's about what your capacity to do is. Okay. It's not about what you're currently doing, that you're being messed with, surveilled, tampered with, people sent in to distract you. It's not about what you're currently doing. It's not about physical action. It's about your capability to do. Okay. So they have a technology. It is used by all sides of the equation. They can see the amount of light coming off your body. They know what you're capable of, etc., etc. They will send people in to distract you. The amount of times that it's happened to me is stellar. I am really good at recognizing it by now, but I'm also a water sign that's really loving and really caring and really emotional. And I have fallen for it a couple times. And to every single time when I fall for it, or when I believe it, or maybe when I fall in love with a person, they get like a ghost and they disappear, right? So, the past experiences, your past soul experiences descending down into your energetic reality without the memory, making you now a we, right? You could say, I identify as a we. I hate all that crap, but I'm just saying it is kind of a funny note on the side. We are just a fractal of God. We have always been a fractal of God, living as God, living in God, living as God, experience ourselves as God, and experiencing ourselves in a creator. Now, the big issue before Tina is here for 3 hours is, how are we doing with this right now? Like, we could talk about the energy and how the energy is kicking everyone's butt, but there's millions of people talking about the energy and how it's kicking everyone's butt. I don't even listen to space weather anymore. It's not necessary. Scott did message me and asked me if I heard the craziness coming in the right ear last Thursday, and I very much did, but I didn't feel a need to make much ado about it, as they said in the 50s. But yeah, Scott and I heard that. So everything's off the charts. The earth changes are off the charts, all of that stuff. Now, here's the importance of where we are now. What am I supposed to do with what I'm supposed to do with? Okay. I used to work in a greenhouse. In fact, I've spent decades working in greenhouses and flower shops, or greenhouses that were flower shops, or flower shops that were greenhouses. I think you get the picture. I have a real strong and powerful connection with the plants, and I always have. But one day I was having a real shitty time with my boss being shitty McShitterpants, right? Because she was jealous of me in every capacity. And I tend to bring that out in her. She should have loved me. I always did what she wanted. I always came in on time. I never called in sick. I always worked late. I always covered other people's shifts. I did everything she ever wanted. She should have loved me, but she hated me because of jealousy. I had such a shitty day with her one time that she sent me out to a greenhouse in January that was half a mile back on the property, probably because it was cold and she didn't want to go, to see if the bird of paradise plant had produced a bird of paradise. And I had to step into the plant to see if it did, because the plant was 70 years old, you guys. And the vibration of putting my hands on it and stepping into it was something I had never experienced before. In fact, not only was the vibration astronomical, the plant started speaking to me, and started specifically speaking to me about my boss. Okay. And if you ever wonder if it's a positive being or a negative being, or your higher self, or some interdimensional overlord, or some interdimensional psychopath, you can always tell by the verbiage that is used. Okay. This plant proceeded to tell me that what was going on between me and my boss was an energetic thing. It had nothing to do with the way I looked. It had nothing to do with my work performance. It had nothing to do with my positivity. It had nothing to do with the way I dressed or my popularity and how everyone loved me. It had to do with the fact that we had a different frequency, and the frequency difference was an agitation to my boss. And so dressing differently, talking different, trying not to be friendly and social and, the company comedian that I was, it wasn't going to make a difference because it was a frequency thing. I don't want to get into this whole story, but this conversation, this is the first full-blown conversation I'd ever had with a plant. Okay. And I want you to know that in this greenhouse was only a bunch of things that had been on this property for this business had been handed down for 3 decades. So I went, long story short, I started going back there every lunch break and laying in the greenhouse. Now, I wasn't laying in the dirt. They had a fabric cloth to keep the weeds down because this is a place that they stashed plants that they'd had for decades to winter them over. And some of them, like the bird of paradise plant that was 70 years old, was so heavy that they couldn't move it. The connection I had with this plant was mind blowing. And so I started spending my lunch break laying in the greenhouse in the middle of January every day, laying on the ground with one hand on the plant, one hand on the bird of paradise plant, and then my face facing the sun so that I could communicate with the sun and with the bird of paradise plant at the same time. Now, the bird of paradise plant would say something to me, the sun would say something to me, and then I ended up being in the middle of a conversation between the 70-year-old bird of paradise plant and the sun. And the gist of what they said was, you will get to the point, and when they said this, I was just shown myself in the picture so I could best comprehend out on the hillside of what looked like Italy, but doesn't matter where it was, could be anywhere. But the conversation between the sun and the plant and I was that I will eventually just be standing out in the middle of a field and be able to point and say, lemon tree here, avocado here, orange tree here. And I thought, well, this is a trip because this is 2014, right? I wasn't a landscaper. I wasn't working with things directly the way I am now. Now, I'm telling you that to tell you what has just happened. I have always had a natural proclivity to work with plants and flowers and specifically sentient life. So that's nothing new. What has happened in the last couple of weeks is something new. Now, when I landscape, I might dig something up and plant it somewhere when it's 100 degrees, and every person in landscaping and gardening will tell you don't ever do that, but it doesn't matter. And I always tell clients, don't worry about it. I've never lost a single plant, and I haven't. But in my hiatus from social media in the last several weeks, I want to tell you what happened. First of all, I had these little containers and what is it called? The little seedling dirt where you can start your seedlings inside so that you don't have to, buy the plants, or so that the plants are bigger when it's time to start gardening. And this is the first year I've ever done this. Okay. So I planted Cosmos in the back of the package says germinates in 7 to 10 days. Okay. So even though I've always been able to do what I want and whatever, this is amping up. So I planted seeds in my little container and I sprayed them with water and I put a little plastic bag over them. And I get up the next morning and I look and they're already up. They're up overnight, and they're up overnight an inch and a half tall. They were pushing on the plastic. And I was like, okay. So I had a client that had a tree that was dead. And while I was out walking a couple of weeks ago, I brought the tree back and I texted her and I said, hey, I brought the tree back over to the plant, back to the plant doctor. And I'm going to bring it back to life. She had been talking to me for several weeks about maybe what would be good to replace it. So last week I sent her a picture of the tree and she said, that's not my tree. And I said, yeah, that's your tree. And she said, oh, well, can we bring it back and put it back in my yard? And I said, of course, that's the plan. So my seeds are coming up overnight, right? So I planted some more seeds and then Googled it and made sure that, that was correct. It takes 7 to 10 days to germinate. Planted a whole batch of other cosmos, this time native, and they came up overnight. Then I went to a little job on my street here, and the lady had planted azalea bushes in full sun. They've been there for a year. They were black. And I said, because I don't want to get too crazy and too weird on people. Oh, hello. Lynn can testify to the majority of this because I've been helping Lynn with her garden and landscaping for, I think, 8 years, 9 years, Lynn, something like that. So first I brought the dead maple tree back to life. Now I've got seeds coming up overnight that are supposed to take 7 to 10 days to germinate. And then 3 days ago, a lady had some full shade azaleas in the full sun for a year, and they were black and they were crispy. And I don't want to get too crazy with people. And I just kind of said to her, I might be able to bring these back to life. And she's like, they're black. And I'm like, well, I might be able to bring them back to life. Let's just put them on. Let me just dig a hole and I'll put them all in the shade over here all together and give them some water. And then I will make a copper wand. And I gave her a 30-second dissertation on electroculture. And she said, okay, I was just going to throw them away and buy some new plants. So I planted these. They're on my street. So I planted them. And then the next morning, I got up and I made a copper wand to bring these things, hopefully, to bring these 3 azaleas back to life. I walked down there with my copper wand, and the bush has green leaves on it, and it's flowering. And I hadn't even brought the wand down there and put it in the ground yet. So I can make seeds germinate overnight. I can bring trees back to life. I can bring anything, no matter how dead it is, back to life. And I started thinking about, what about the things that I can't see? What about my body? What about my perspective love life? What about my perspective mission? What about these things, right? I can't see energetically the progress that I'm making. So my only assumption is, if I can bring things back to life and make plants germinate overnight, that those other things that I'm working on that I don't see visible physical things, they are energetically happening. And I'm telling you that because you are probably a person who's working a job and then doing a mission as a side gig. And all of you, every single one of you that I have talked to, wants to know, how can I bridge this gap, right? We're in the middle of a crash and burn fucking awakening, right? So while we're in the middle of a crash and burn, while we're in the middle of absolute chaos, not that there are not beautiful things happening, but we're wanting to know what to do, how to rebuild. What am I going to do in the future, while the majority of you, again, have this gig, right? Have this physical 3D job, and then you have some, sidebar thing that you love, like Scott doing sound healing and working with horses, like Lynn going into that multidimensional aspect of self to draw fairies and squirrels running away with the neighbor's pumpkins and all these little amazing woodland creatures. We're all trying to figure this out, which leads me to where I'm going next, and that is the employment gap. The world is probably not ready for me to say, I'm the liaison with the plants. And I can say the sun and the bird of paradise plant told me this in 2014, and I have been doing it. I'm telling you, in the last 2 weeks, it is amped up to a pace that is absolutely astounding. And I mentioned this And the reason that I'm mentioning it is not because, that is the mission, the only thing I plan on doing or anything like that. I mentioned that to you because energetically, and with your thoughts, you are doing and creating so many things that you don't yet see in physical reality, and you still kind of have that physical job. And so the question is the employment gap in our new resume. Do I write a resume and say, you know, my name is Tina Hammond. I bring, plants back to life. I can germinate seeds overnight. I can just say to a plant, you're going to be fine. And then I was like, oh, the whole line of trees on this property was dead when I moved in. Should I bring all the trees back to life too? I mean, can I say that? Can I make that resume with like just 4 statements? Right? I'm not to the point where I can put on my resume, snap my fingers and there's a lemon tree over there and an avocado tree over there. But it's something we're all trying to figure out is how we can bridge that employment, um, gap while we're in them, because a lot of these new jobs haven't been created. Why do you think there's so many people on YouTube talking and talking and talking? There are people on there that are just talking because they want to have 15 minutes of fame, or they want to be a supermodel or spokesmodel or something. There is, or makeup artist. There is some of that going on, but the majority of us out here are trying to let everyone know that everything is going to be okay, and that what you're experiencing doesn't mean that you're crazy, because there are hundreds of thousands, probably millions of us at this point experiencing it. It's so important for us to know. But there's got to be other jobs out there, because otherwise, what's going to happen? This tiny house movement is big for a reason. How many of us don't want to have anything to do with the parts of physical reality that are manipulated, controlled, and usurped, right? We're not saying, you know what, I don't want to be a part of physical reality. Um, we're not saying that we don't want to have anything to do with it. We're not saying we don't want to make money or go to the grocery store or have intimate relationships with people, right? We're just saying the old business model doesn't work, right? Now, perhaps you're a computer engineer or something like that. So you could just, say, okay, well, I'm not going to work for this, corporation. I don't like their, policies. I don't like the way they, treat sentient life. So I'm going to start my own company as an engineer, or I'm going to work for somebody in sustainable living or sustainable housing or whatever, right? So some things are easier to slide from one thing to another, right? If you're a computer engineer, right, there's a million choices you have to make. You don't have to work for the man, so to speak. But there are lots of us that are trying to figure out um, the employment gap and what the hell, to put on the resume. Now, why do you think so many people are living in vans? Which is really not the answer. That's not the answer either, because in some ways that's avoiding it. Now, just how I explained to you earlier, I don't know the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. I'm not knocking anyone for the van life, because they have figured out a way. That is a way in the interim. That is a way in the chaos to detach or disembowel yourself from the systemic machine that we know is physical reality work. But I don't think that's a permanent solution either. But the reason, and I almost did it myself before I leased a brand new car. I almost bought a 20-year-old van, and I almost did the exact same thing. I'm like, you know what? I have a phone. I can make videos from the road, because I'm tired of all the money and all the energy and all the rat race, blah, 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 right? That's why I'm doing landscaping and gardening in the interim of saying there's a huge employment gap. So just so you know, again, that I am not knocking anyone who is living the dream and traveling. That's what we need to do. We have to go sometimes to that extreme when we're at this, the matrix is a 3D extreme. So then we just go over to van life, where we're completely removed from the matrix altogether, probably besides your phone and your phone bill, right? Totally off grid. And people are doing that because they don't want to be part of the system. But what we really have to do is fix the system. And there's so many things that need to be fixed. Like, for example, in most places, if you buy property and want to build a tiny house or buy a tiny house or whatever, you have to get a pool permit, because these morons, even though the tiny house movement is taking over the planet, these morons still don't have the paperwork to build or buy a tiny home and put it on a slab. They refuse to do it. So they don't have anything listed under, I want to say it's 900 square feet. I believe that's what it is in the US, 900 square feet. So if you want to do something under 900 square feet, you got to get a fucking swimming pool permit. Okay. Even though this has been going on for years. And this is what I mean, right? The employment gap. And really looking at, what am I doing? What am I capable of doing? What am I going to put on my resume, right? And we're in this big interim where people, like I said, if you're a computer engineer, you can easily slide, because you can go work for somebody, right? You could, go work for Joe Rogan or someone that has, millions of listeners or followers or whatever. There are some jobs that you may have, physical 3D reality jobs, that you can just change and work for yourself, or work for somebody else, or just not work for a corporation. But many of us are wanting to know, how do I do this in the interim? And I want to just personally say very briefly that I have found that this is the only thing that Chat GPT is good for. Now, I have the free version or whatever, so I'm not sitting here talking to him or anything. I asked some information about twin flames. It spit out everything I already knew. There was nothing beyond it, because all it houses within that interface is the information that humans already have. Now, just because Scott has twin information and you don't, doesn't mean it's not available. So Chat GPT, nothing on the twin flame thing, and multiple other things that I have asked it, right? One thing it is super friggin' great at is, let's say, for example, I'm a life path number 8. So I could put in Chat GPT, what's the best career, or what's a group of careers that's really good for life path number 8. So it'll tell you what life path number 8 is, what you're good at, what you're super proficient at, and it'll tell you the things. Okay. And it'll continue to run on that. Okay. So it says life path number 8, you're great at this, this, and this. You could do this, this, and this. And then you can even ask it, what's the best place to advertise? How should I word my advertisement? All of that stuff. I found it to be amazing and super helpful. And I talked to Lynn McGreevy about it. She also used it and found it to be super helpful, with talking and getting information on how to get her artwork out there. So it's great for that. Esoteric stuff, energetic stuff, I'm not buying it, because, as I said, and I did a whole video about interfacing with Chat GPT and other artificial intelligence. It only knows what humanity as a whole already knows. So you take everything that's in the computer files, everything that's in the books that have been written on the, which is a lot. It's great. And I'm sure it can be super overwhelming for many, many people. That's a lot of fucking information, right? But you're looking for energetic or esoteric or ascension stuff. I've seen people talking to Chat GPT, and I'm not down with it. And, do it all day long if you feel like you're getting something out of it. I've seen a couple in my feed on Facebook that, is somebody I'm friends with saying, oh, here's a mind-blowing conversation with Chat GPT. And I'll listen, and there isn't anything I already didn't know. So the thing is it going to be mind-blowing for you? It is going to be mind-blowing, right? Like if you read David Wilcock's Synchronicity Key and didn't have any information about synchronicity, that would be mind-blowing. So in that same way, if you've never read these books or don't have the information, or haven't broken yourself into the living library or the Akashic record or perhaps the Vatican, this information could be mind-blowing to you. But every time I see someone saying, "Oh my God, this is it. Oh my God, this is so mind-blowing," I do give that a minute. Okay. And never has it been anything mind-blowing. And never has it been anything that I don't know or that you don't know. Okay. So is it helping a lot of people? Hell yeah. It's giving them a real quick set of cliff notes on the Grand Awakening that they just figured out yesterday was happening. So yeah, there's that. Also, symbolically, the Pope died. May he rest in wherever he has chosen to rest. I'm not going to get into what that means politically or any other way, but I want to tell you it's significant. It's massively significant, and it has nothing to do with him. We're talking the death of Rome. So I'm going to tell you, just like I told you, with the federal health websites, just like I told you with FEMA, just like I told you with everything else, you're not going to know what's going on until the operation is over. Death to the Pope, whether he died 6 months ago, whether he died on Easter Sunday, whenever he died from whatever he died from, you have to remember that the majority of what we're seeing, hearing, and feeling is a symbol and not necessarily something else. Okay. So I'll tell you, this is death to the church. Okay. And not just death to the church, like people are not going to go and they're not going to give money in the handout basket and the church is going to, lose their money and they're not going to pass the basket down the pews anymore. Okay. Let's step it up about 10 million notches and say that what they have been doing physically, energetically, in all ways, what they have been doing, their control, their manipulation, all of that of financial markets. Yes, the Vatican is in on manipulating financial markets. They're in on underground pedophile rings. They're in on everything. So the death of the Pope, somebody maybe want to be sad. Some people may be cheering. I am going to tell you in neutrality, this means death of the money laundering, racketeering, market manipulating, underground trafficking. That's what we're looking at, the death of. And again, people like to say, "Oh, where's your source?" or "Give me a link." I can't give you a link to my psychic ability, right? And I had no idea. I saw the Pope died. I had no idea that this was going to happen, that this was even going to come out my mouth. I didn't know anything about the Pope. As you know, I got a message before about FEMA being locked down and all their money confiscated and all of that stuff. There was an executive order by President Trump in 2017 that says if there's a computer trail or a paper trail from one country to another, it doesn't matter if the executive order wasn't written, signed, or established in your country. Any country, so the Vatican being connected, paper trail, that'd be the old days, but the Vatican being connected in the computer system with stock market, with child trafficking, with all these other things that I have already mentioned, means that even though the Vatican is even separate from its own country, it is not separate from the Crimes Against Humanity executive order that was written in 2017. Now, when I say the Pope is dead and the collection basket is empty, what I mean is crimes against humanity that I just mentioned that were coming from the Vatican mean automatic seizing of all assets, okay? They can electronically lock the Pope alive or dead and everybody else out of the Vatican. They can seize their cars. They can seize the Vatican itself. They can seize the library, the artwork, the precious metals, the commodities that they have in the stock market, all of it. That's what the executive order said from 2017. So saying to you that the Pope is dead or that the collection basket is empty is not what I'm saying. I'm saying all of their crimes against humanity mean that they can and will be locked out physically of their housing. They'll be locked out of the stock market. They'll be locked out of, and the last thing I want you to know, Trump, no Trump, tariff, no tariff, wherever you are, this has nothing to do with tariffs. You people, and maybe it's helpful for maybe your partners or your family or your next door neighbor if you are in communication with these people to know that when we're talking about putting tariffs, what we're really talking about is, oh, there's a lot of high tariffs, so that means the goods are going to slow down. Look at the reality of the situation. Goods are going to slow down. We're going to start making shit in our own country. That's fucking fabulous to begin with. Okay. It's not about taking things out on Canada. It's not about taking anything out on China. It's not about taking anything out on Putin or Russia or India or any other country where we get goods and services. Okay. There is a little elite group who is going down, who doesn't need a name. Let's not give them any more attention. And then there's a whole group of people that are not necessarily on the same page called we're out for what's best for humanity and sentient life. Okay. The tariffs, stop whining about the tariffs. Stop listening to people whine about the tariffs. They're slowing down goods and services for a reason. And BRICS, China, India, Brazil, China, India, Brazil, Russia. We're all in it on together. The whole tariff thing, okay? It's not worth giving your fucking time or attention to the tariff situation because there is no situation. Everybody's in on it. The situation, well, I shouldn't say there's no situation. Here's the situation, okay? It's everybody that wants a free and sovereign planet versus a group of small people who want to traffic children, sell drugs, and manipulate and control everybody. It's not worth reading about. It's not worth looking at. It's not worth arguing over anything, no matter what country you live in. It doesn't matter. It's India, it's China, it's Brazil, it's Russia, it's Canada. They're all in on together. Now, does the political side of things have any fucking clue what's going on? Most of them, zero clue. Okay, so they're going to argue, they're going to defend, they're going to dissuade, they're going to whatever they're going to do. It's about a small group of people versus the West. And if I say it one last time, every fucking country is in on it. It has nothing to do with the price of your milk or your eggs or your throw pillows from Mexico. It has zero to do with that. Okay, this is almost the second longest video I have ever made. Thank you for everybody who just joined. I want to stare off into space and read your comments. Better late than never. I feel like I say that to you a lot, Rennie. Don't I? Thank you guys so much for being here. Hopefully, people can enjoy it on the replay. I like to make it on my phone because it has so much better of a chance of getting out into circulation, but it's so much easier to just be me without the trolls. It's so much easier to know that people only watch 12 minutes of my video and I should make it 12 minutes long, but it was important. It needs to be said. And I need to just continue to do this and continue to be here. The employment gap is a real thing. And it's important that we talk to each other and we share. There can't just be one job anymore, right? So we got millions of people on YouTube making videos trying to assist people. There's nothing wrong with that, but we need a little bit more variety, a little bit more spice of life. We've got millions of things that need to change besides just talking and blogging and making videos. Where we are for the moment and in the interim of chaos. Thank you so much for being here. And thank you for sharing. And hopefully some of you will come back and give your ideas. I know like Lynn is working her art. Rennie is working on her book. She's probably done or close to done with that. Yeah, but we need ideas on how to work together so that we're not, like I said, I know so many of you are doing a job and then you're doing your gig on the side. Okay, let's talk, let's communicate, let's open up these pathways. Okay, and do this. Yeah, so thank you so much for being here. This was the news that didn't make the news. Until next time, we are at the final judgment here. You decide who you love. You decide what you're going to do. You decide what you're going to wear, what you're going to look like, who you're going to be with, what mission you're going to do, all of it. Do not let anyone tell you what to do. If anybody remembers that song, who was that? I can't remember. Fuck you, I won't do what you tell me. It's a great theme song for right now, okay? Doesn't mean we're angry, doesn't mean we're violent, means we're going a different way, a way that is peaceful, a way that is loving, a way that is sustainable for all of us and sentient life. Thank you. And until next time, bye-bye.